Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. My name is Jordan, and on behalf of Toby, we're so glad that you're here. At Toby, we're super passionate about making products that help kids use movement to self-regulate and live healthy lives, which is why we're bringing this conversation to you today. I'll be your moderator, and in just a minute, I'll introduce our incredible panelists. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. We are recording today's session and we'll share access to the recording after the event. Attendees are muted, but we have dedicated time for audience Q&A at the end of the conversation. I already have some questions that were submitted prior to the event, but please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A tab at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can. The conversation today is also for informational purposes only, so nothing discussed should be taken as medical, clinical, or legal advice. Our panelists are just here to share their expertise and their personal perspectives, but as you all know, every child and every family is different. So to start us off, Leanne, would you like to tell us who you are, what you do, and what brings you to this work?
Sure. My name is Leanne Paskvalich. I am a neurodiversity consultant. I also host neurodiversity events, and I am located in Colorado. So I work with families and individuals to help them find neurodiversity resources and related supports. I'm just really passionate about connecting people to information quickly and efficiently, and thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. We're happy to have you. Kirti, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. I'm so excited to be here. So, hi, everyone. My name is Kirti. I am a pediatric occupational therapist, a mom of two little ones, and I also have my own private OT boutique practice that's based out of the Chicagoland area. And it primarily focuses on things like sensory processing, social emotional development, as well as helping kids with self-regulation. And so I've been doing this for about 8 years now. And my primary therapy approach is sensory integration therapy. But I'm also certified in the SOS feeding approach and DIR floor time. And I think what originally drew me to this work was just, when you see a child and they've just like accomplished something that they haven't been able to do before, and they get this feeling of like, oh my goodness, I can do this. And that feeling to me is just so special. And they feel so confident and independent in those skills. And I think being a parent has definitely deepened that passion for me. And it's also deepened my perspective of what parents really go through on a day-to-day basis. I firsthand experienced those, picky eating moments, like the meltdowns, how frustrating that can be for families. And I do see it. And so I'm really passionate about supporting parents understand their child's nervous system needs and sensory needs, and giving them strategies that actually do work for them for both home and at school.
Great. Thanks, Kirti. And Claudia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Claudia Bowen. I'm a teacher. I'm a parent also of a autistic human. He was diagnosed when he was 9. I've been teaching 35 years, and I have seen. I'm a Montessori teacher, so we are very pro independence. So when we see children who struggle, we definitely want to help them and try to get parents to understand that evaluation is very important for us to help your child. And it's very frustrating for the child who cannot control and balance their emotions to be in the classroom. So what else? My autistic child is high functioning, what we used to call Asperger's. He was evaluated at age 9, and he got a 504 and an IEP. He went to college, so he is high functioning. And that's what we want all the children to be once they get diagnosed, to be independent human beings.
Great, thank you. And to everyone who has just been joining since I made opening remarks, just so you know, attendees are muted, but please do share your questions through the Q&A. Great. And so before we dive into the first question from our conversation today, I'd love to hear from the audience for a second. I'm putting a quick poll on your screen about your child's age range. So this is just a quick question that should help us make our conversation even more relevant. So take a second to tick one of the boxes. If you have more than one child, just choose the age range of the child that this conversation is most relevant for.
Jordan, we can't vote.
I'm sorry. You're not allowed to
blocked.
vote. Your answer matters, but not for this poll.
Keep it to myself.
Just wait a few more seconds to let people share their answers. Alrighty. So it looks like we are well scattered throughout all of the age ranges between 4 and younger and 12 and older. So that's super helpful for us to know. So thank you everyone for filling that out. To that end, we can definitely make sure to talk about who kids in a variety of age ranges will be most likely to work with. So Kirti, to kick us off, could you speak to which types of therapists or specialists a child is most likely to see after diagnosis and what you can expect from each one?
Yes, for sure. And so I think we do have a graphic here to kind of help. And so this seems like a lot of therapists, but I think one of the biggest things to take away from this is that you don't need all of these therapists or specialists at the same time, or even all of them. We just kind of want to bring awareness to them. And many families who do have a diagnosis generally start off with either one type of therapy or maybe two. And then, that therapist or those therapists will kind of guide the family and the child to kind of what makes sense next. And so I'll definitely be speaking to OT a little bit more in depth because it's definitely my passion. And so OT primarily focuses on the underlying skills that are needed for everyday life. So think of skills like playing, interacting with their peers, learning some of those higher level academic skills, and self-care. So things like getting, teeth brushing, getting dressed, bathing, all of those things. And also, it really works on and supports how children are processing the world around them. And so, when we're thinking about that, we're kind of thinking about sensory needs. And so, many children that I see enter through OT through sensory concerns. So we might see things like difficulty with the morning routine. And, I've totally been there. Like the morning routine is so challenging to just get out the door. So, you may see things like sensitivity to textures. They might not like certain types of fabrics on their clothes, not wanting to get messy. Sometimes they could have either very high energy or on the opposite end, very slow, low energy levels. They're very sluggish. You might also experience things like end of the day meltdowns or having a meltdown over something very small that seems very small. But I think what's really important with this is that when it feels like it's constant, you're fighting an uphill battle almost every day and, you're trying strategies and nothing really seems to work. That's when it's worth taking a closer look at that and getting occupational therapy. And so some of the concerns that I mentioned, that is the sensory system talking for the most part. And it's differences in how the nervous system is processing all the sensory input, which makes it a little bit harder for a child to stay regulated. And so in OT, generally, the first step of the process is we do an evaluation where we gather, your strengths, what areas of focus that we need to work on. We might do some sensory-based assessments. We'll do some motor-based assessments where we'll kind of see where their motor skills are at. And the sessions are definitely play-based. And it's not that we're just playing, it's very, very intentional. Like the therapist has, something in mind of target areas. So you may see things like a child getting on a swing, which are a little bit different than what you would find at the playground. And it just looks like they're swinging, but we're working on some of those underlying skills and focus areas. You might also see things like obstacle courses or doing some heavy work, resistive types of games or activities. And then those are really, building the foundational systems like sensory processing. And these activities definitely help children for, to be more confident in, being independent, to plan, to focus, and manage their emotions. And so I think of OT as basically playing their way through working on real life skills. And so I think that's why OT becomes a central piece. Is we're not really just focusing on one aspect of the child. We're kind of targeting the child as a whole in a holistic way. They do look, OT and PT do look similar on the outside, but PT is going to be more focused on, how the child is, like, do they have the building blocks? Do they have strength? Do they have endurance? Things like that. And of course, it's going to be through play and movement based activities. And I can quickly talk about the rest as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
So speech therapy, oftentimes people hear about speech and, they think about just, learning how to say words, but it's also often about following multi-step directions, organizing your thoughts, staying on topic, picking up on social cues. And so essentially understanding, expressing, and connecting with others. And then, of course, sessions are often play-based or conversation-based. And all of these therapies really do tailor to your child's unique needs. And then something quick to mention about developmental optometry. So sometimes I do see an overlap between OT and developmental optometry where the visual system is concerned. And so kids who often skip lines on a page, lose focus while lose their place on a page. They might just avoid reading and writing altogether. And sometimes it can look like a focus issue, but it's often visual too. And so that's just something worth noting. And it'll be a little bit different than just going to a regular optometrist. They're going to really look at how the eyes are functioning as a team. And then for ABA, which is applied behavioral analysis, something quick just to say about that is that some are really play-based and others are more structured and rigid. And so something to kind of keep in mind is not just should we do ABA, it's more about what kind of approach is the best fit for your child. And so, you can observe, you can ask questions about, what kind of approach they take, and then make the best decision that's the right fit for you and your family.
Great, thank you. And Claudia, could you speak to some of the terminology that you would see on the school system side?
IEP, usually I work with 3 to 6, 3 years old to 6-year-old. That time, usually you start asking parents, talking to them if the child, we suggest evaluation. And once they get evaluated, and if they're going to, I'm working a private school, usually the IEP and the 504, it's for the public system. It can be used for us, but they have more aid in the public system. So the IEP is very important for them to get. That way the public system will know what to get the child and what the child needs. And the 504 will protect the IEP from doing it. I know that for me personally, my son with the IEP, I knew that he was protected for the teacher to do what he needed to be helped on. And that's very important because not all the children, like Kitty said, is not everybody is the same. It's completely different. Every every child who has been diagnosed with autism is completely different. It's not two alike. So they need that IEP for them to be really taking care of the learning, and the 504 that protects the child from the the IEP supported, the 504 supports the IEP. So there both needs to be that. The least restrictive environment is for if you want your child to be in a different way of learning, not a public system, another one, say Montessori or Waldorf or other different development uh, teaching. So you can take the IEP and the 504 and go to those schools and see if they have your child needs, because not every school has OT or PT and that in there in the school, and your child will need it. So it's very important to know that, to get aware that the school that you decide to put your child in has those support system for them.
Yeah, so that's a great call out about making sure that the school system has the right support that your child needs. So, Leanne, now that we've talked about the different types of specialists and programs, how do you recommend that families approach actually finding a therapist who's right for you and your child? Like, how do you balance the system with trusting your parent intuition when you're trying to find the right provider?
Sure. So the first thing I encourage parents to do is to get really clear on what the most urgent need is. Is it behavior at home, school challenges, handwriting, sensory overwhelm, communication? Naming that pain point helps you narrow in on the kind of provider you actually need. For example, a speech language pathologist or an occupational therapist or some other specialist. Once you have a general idea, start building a short list of names. You can ask the diagnosing provider for recommendations. You can also ask your child's school, especially if there is a school OT or related service provider. And then always talk with other parents in your community who've been through this. It's time consuming to make those calls, but it gives you real information about wait lists, insurance, and availability. From there, it's a question of fit. After you've confirmed the basics, they have the right specialty, they can see you at a time that works for you, and the finances line up, either private pay or insurance. I really encourage parents to trust their intuition then once they gather all that information. So I see it as a balance. Use the system to narrow your options, and then use your parent intuition to decide who actually feels right for your child and your family at that time. And I always tell people, parents, notice how the therapist talks to you and your child, whether you feel heard and whether their approach feels like it's a match for your values. Start first with a session or two and then kind of evaluate, see how that connection feels, and use that experience to decide if this is the right therapist for you and if you want to move forward and keep going.
And then, Kirti, as an OT, I'm curious, like, what advice do you give to parents when they're trying to find the right therapist?
Yeah, so I can definitely speak to the therapist side. And so kind of continuing on from Leanne, I think the biggest thing is that you shouldn't really leave sessions feeling confused or unsure about what you're working on in therapy. The therapist that you have should be able to explain the reasons why the activities, like the reason behind what you're doing and the skills that they're working on. So something like, okay, we did an obstacle course today. And of course, the child is like, Mommy, I did an obstacle course and it sounds really fun. And, you might be thinking like, well, is that all we did? But a good therapist will connect the dots of like, what is the reason why we did the obstacle course? And so, it'll be like, oh, maybe he or she showed better attention, better body awareness, things like that. They really need to be able to connect those kind of dots for you. And then also the biggest thing in therapy is that individualized approach. And so, if you have friends in the same therapy clinic, they might be doing the same type of activities, but it's a little nuanced, right? It's not just a one size fits all plan. It needs to be individualized and specific for each child, even if the activity looks similar. And so I think for parents, it's always important to ask those questions early on. What does a typical session look like? How are we measuring progress? We will always welcome those kinds of questions. And so I think you had mentioned something about navigating the system. I think it's definitely, the wait list, the referrals, it can help you get started. But I think you should just keep checking in with yourself, making sure that, this is this, the right fit. Is the therapist truly helping work on the areas that, that we want to be working on?
Thank you. And then for our last question before we move on to the Q&A section, Leanne, what do parents need from a knowledge, skills, and even like emotional standpoint to support themselves during this process?
Yeah, from a knowledge and skill standpoint, I always remind parents, you know your child best. And a diagnosis does not change that. It just gives you more language and insight into why they might have certain likes and dislikes or challenges, which helps you understand what kind of supports might fit them. Emotionally, parents really need community, and that might look like joining a Facebook group, finding a local support group run by a parent or nonprofit organization, or simply talking with other parents at a school in your neighborhood. Those everyday conversations can be just as powerful as the formal supports like therapy. Quick story, I like to use what I call the purple car analogy. Imagine a friend tells you their dream is to own a purple car, and you think, I've never even seen a purple car. And then over the next few weeks, you suddenly start noticing purple cars everywhere. A diagnosis can feel similar once your child is identified as autistic or ADHD. You start to notice how many other families around you are on a similar path, and it becomes easier to spot your people, and connect with them. Those parent connections matter because they're people you don't have to explain yourself to. They already have a sense of what you're going through, what your household is like, what's going on with your kid, because they're living something very similar. And it's a sense that you get of, I'm not alone, I'm not the only one. And that is hugely helpful to parents on an emotional level.
And Claudia, do you have any tips for things that parents can do to expand their own knowledge and skills throughout this process?
Yeah, like Leanne said, just keep, when you once the child get diagnosed, even before that, I think as a parent, you start questioning because there's something that you know that is something going on, but you don't know exactly what it is. So once the evaluation is there, I started reading books even before my son was diagnosed, because my son is 25 now. So that was in the 2000s that he was diagnosed, early 2000s. So I started reading books about autism. What is it? How do we, why is, how did this happen? This and that. So I think that getting knowledge with books, then start looking at the internet about organizations to know what, we have here in Chicago, there's a lot of organizations for autism. We're lucky that we have a lot of them. And just getting in touch with parents, because definitely the children is like they get attracted to the same things. So you will find a lot of children that have know exactly, oh, you have ADD, ADHD, autism, ODD, all those things, and they will, for one reason or another, they will attract each other. So that's good. So you get that, one child will get to the parents, and community is very important. That way, like Leanne said, you don't feel alone, and you don't see your child like, wow, this is the only child. No, there's a lot of children right now, lots of children, and definitely getting into connect with the organizations that can guide you to get knowledge and to help your child around it. Definitely.
Awesome. So I think we've had some questions submitted during our conversation. The first question we'll speak to is about timing. So, when is it too late to find a therapist? Like, what happens if you have issues with wait lists or you feel like, your child is quote unquote too old to find someone? Leanne, would
Yeah,
you like to
it's
speak to this?
never, ever, ever too late. And I think, it's hard to be patient when you're really worried. And I think is the driving force, is just parent anxiety. And like, I should have known before, and there's wait lists. Like Claudia said, you can read books, you can connect with other parents. There are play groups you can connect with. There are things you can do besides or while you're waiting to connect with a therapist. Back to that community. We have the internet now. I think I would caution on that a little bit. Do what feels right for, your kiddo, your family, and take a breath because it's going to be okay. You're doing a great job and it's going to be okay.
Thank you. A second question that came in, what can be done to help a child that has sensory issues that may be a trauma reaction, as well as having sensory dysregulation?
So I can provide just general information about sensory. And so I'm not a trauma-informed therapist, unfortunately. But things like doing heavy work, deep resistive types of movement activities can definitely feel self-regulating. And so, squeezing your hands together. I'm not sure, depending on the age, chewing gum that gives you some sensory input, and that's also very calming and regulating. Things like just heavy resistive type workouts. Also, it just depends on the child's age as well. And so I see kids who are pretty young. And so we do a lot of play-based things like doing those obstacle courses, doing a lot of jumping activities, crashing. And so it really does depend on also what your child reacts well to. So again, to that individualized approach.
And I would also add, for that downtime is weighted blankets.
Mhm.
That can be really helpful, when you're trying to calm your child down. Yeah, so that is another tool in the toolbox.
Another question we had, what do you suggest if there has been a lot of OT turnover with your child?
So yes, unfortunately, I think this is a part of life, the therapist, might be going on maternity leave or they left you to go to another clinic or they moved across the country, things like that. And that's a very valid question and can be very frustrating for parents because every time you get a new therapist it can be like, okay, well, that therapist has to get to know my child now, and like kind of not really starting from scratch, but we're it's going to take a couple of weeks for the child to get used to the new therapist. And it is very unique. That may be an indicator that you might want to check out a different therapist at another clinic that is close to you, or get on a wait list while you're still pursuing the other therapist. So yeah, I think that's what you could do.
Or take a break from therapy. That's another option, and then kind of start up again because it is tricky because there's a lot of relationship building that takes place in therapy, and really that's primary for so many people.
Thank you. Another question we received is, when should you explore OT options through school?
So for the school portion, I think just getting started. So like I guess it depends on your child's age. I always say that early intervention is key. And so if you are seeing a therapist, at a private practice outpatient clinic, and you're starting school-based therapy, those two therapists can connect with each other, and also work with each other to kind of come up with a plan. So early intervention is definitely key, I think, as soon as you can.
Yeah, like Kirti said, early intervention. That's why, working with 3 to 6 years old, if if the teacher recommends or suggests, parents should kind of don't be offended or have like, oh, no, no, no. Look into it, because if we're saying something, it's because we see it. And we want to help your child. We're not trying to I don't know, to hurt them. They are the opposite. We want them to flourish, because we know that with all the struggles that they have, and if they have meltdowns every time, if they cannot hold a pencil, they need those OT. And so they definitely need that. Also, a child with autism has to click with a therapist or with anybody. I mean, really, with a teacher or with a therapist. And so it's very important for the children. It's not up to the parent to, I mean, of course, you're going to go and bring them to the therapist. But if you see that the child does not connect with the therapist, then look for another one, because it's not going to change. I mean, they're very stubborn people. So they just, if they have to connect in 1, 2 sessions, you see that it's not something going on, start looking for someone else. It's a faster, and that way you can move on. But definitely OT is needed a lot. And parents, I wish that parents would understand that we are not trying to push OT on everybody, but there's a lot of children who need the OT for the emotions and sensory and fine motor skills and all that. So
I heard one theme I noticed a lot is the importance of like early intervention and kind of taking, I guess, these suggestions as an opportunity to try to understand, what your child needs as soon as possible. One question I had is, let's say you do have an evaluation and diagnosis. Is it important to get new evaluations as your child continues to grow? Like, should you ever revisit this, or is it kind of a one and done situation?
So I would say it's never just one and done. So you get the evaluation, and then about every 3 to 6 months, you'll probably we would hope to see some progress in therapy, and so you get progress notes, as necessary. So like 3 to 6 months. So every 6 months you'll be getting a progress note. The other thing is that I think if you're not seeing any progress, that's also kind of like a red flag, to be, seeing if this is working for me or not. Is this therapist the right fit? And so that's something to be looking at.
Yeah, and I think progress monitoring, which what Kirti's kind of talking about, is super important. And you do get that through the IEP, and you should be getting that through your outpatient therapy. So school and your outside therapist should be giving you progress reports. But as far as evaluations, that initial one where they were evaluated and received the diagnosis of autism or ADHD, and maybe that's at 4 years old. And then I am always recommending, it's just really good practice as that children, as they're growing, another evaluation, maybe entering middle school or in late elementary school, and then again in high school, because kids change and develop. The diagnosis is not going to go away. But as they learn things and learn skills and develop personalities, kind of new things come up, challenges as well as skills. And so continuously over a timeline, identifying those things, I think, is really important.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We are coming up on the end of our panel, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I also don't want to go without offering each of our panelists the chance to share any closing thoughts. If a parent is sitting at home right now feeling a little overwhelmed by all of this, what would be the one thing that you want them to walk away with today?
So I would say I don't think you need to have everything figured out all alone or even at the same time. It's really important that you ask questions, and it's definitely okay to ask questions. Trust your instincts. I think that's very, very important, and that's how that will lead you to find the right therapist and the right fit for your child. And consistency is also very important. And so with that support, that can make a pretty big difference. And I think it's just really all about what's going to best support your child, feel regulated, and feel confident.
And I would say find a parent community, whether that be at your school or through the Autism Society or ADHD organizations like CHAD. Go to a conference. That's a great way to meet other parents, whether it's a half day or another. Communities have resource fairs related to different service providers. I would just say, make connections and support yourself through connecting with other parents.
Claudia, do you want to share any closing thoughts? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay. Diagnosed with autism is not like, I don't know, people see it very like a very sad thing. Yeah, it's not a person. It's not no, it's not a neurotypical person. But my son has a full life now. Yes, when he was little, we struggle, but your child will be okay. That he will be okay or she will be okay as long as we know how to guide them. Because if we don't know how to guide them, if we don't know what exactly they need, it's not possible. So don't be afraid of getting them evaluated. If somebody suggests that you need to be evaluated, don't be afraid of the OT. Don't be afraid of getting the right help, because we have a lot of organizations that can help you. Of course, with parents, like Leanne said, get in a conference. There's a lot of conferences for autism right now, and you can connect with people. There's a groups of Facebook for autistic parents. So there's a lot of community, and definitely, I mean, autism is not like the worst that it can be. There's they will be okay. As long as they have the support and the love for the family, it will be okay.
Great. Well, I want to give a genuine thank you to Leanne, Kirti, and Claudia for speaking so thoughtfully about how to navigate this and how to navigate all the resources out there from both a professional and personal perspective. I definitely learned a lot. And thank you all to our attendees for being here and for the wonderful questions that you submitted. If you do want to continue the conversation, we actually do have a parent Facebook group on for Toby. It's a private group, so we make sure it's only nice people in there, and we'll be sending a follow-up email with a link to the group, access to today's recording, information about how to learn more about our panelists' work, and then any resources that were requested as well. So please keep an eye out. And thanks again, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.